So the goals that I have for today are to really give you an overview of a lot of the services at CNPS, which are now virtual. And then just a bit about sort of supporting students, making referrals, and some things that you can do. And I really always try to make this practical so that you can hopefully walk away with a little more awareness of what you might be referring to, or different ways to approach students or say things, and really just be that supportive staff or faculty person that you are. So I want to talk about the continuum of care. A lot of times when people think about our services at CNPS, they really do think about that in the office, sit-down therapy, or meetings with students, which is, very much a part of what we do. But in order to really support the mental health and well-being of the campus, we have to start way before somebody would ever enter our office for any type of treatment or intervention. And so really looking at prevention efforts, assessment, treatment, and referral, and then in the end, crisis intervention. So a span of things that we are doing in our office, as I said, to really support the well-being of our whole campus. So on the prevention side, I'm not going to say everything that we do, but I do want you to get a flavor for some of the prevention activities that we engage in. And so if anyone has heard of the Alcohol E-Checkup to Go, that is an online intervention that students are required to engage with prior to registering for the second semester. And so this is helping them address their use of alcohol in a personalized way. And over 16 controlled studies says that it reduces use in students. And so we want to do that right away so that we don't see any bump in alcohol or related consequences for students in their use. And then I also wanted to give you an example of an initiative that we have in our office. It's called Aztecs Reaching Aztecs, and it is peer facilitated, so undergraduate students. And just an anecdote, as we are recruiting for these 10 peer facilitator positions, we this year, and we've always gotten a lot of applications, but this year we got like 200 applications or something. And this initiative is around helping students feel more connected to each other and to the campus in a more depthful way. And so you can see just from the outset of the recruitment, students are really, really interested not only in being connected themselves, but in helping others feel connected as well. If anyone was able to see, we've done a big Chipotle event out on campus on Campanile a couple of years in a row, or a few semesters actually, where we give out free Chipotle. The only catch is that you have to sit down with someone that you don't know and have a conversation. And these are facilitated by prompts, and our peer facilitators deliver the burritos and things and help students get a conversation going. So these have been really, really popular events, hundreds of students participating. We're not doing Chipotle on Campanile right now. Our peer facilitators came up with pretty much a throwback idea. And this is You've Got a Pal in Me, which is throwback to the old pen pal days. I don't know that people are going to actually be using snail mail for this, but at least by email, students opt in to get connected with another student and then start having a dialogue, and it's someone that they did not know before. So we sent out an email to all new students this week, actually, and within a couple of hours, we had over 100 students opting into this. So this is just an example of something that we're trying to do right now to increase connection. And there are many other things. Another very important part of what we do is preparing faculty, staff, and students to support other students. So engaging with faculty and staff in presentations like this. We also have some official certification presentations. QPR is Question, Persuade, Refer, and it's a suicide prevention training program. Hundreds of faculty and staff and a lot of you have engaged in this. And also I Can Help is a little bit more depthful version of something like QPR. And we provide this to faculty, staff, units, any groups that we can sort of get to really help faculty and staff feel more confident in engaging and supporting our students who may be in distress. We have our social media accounts, and I will talk about that more later. One is starring my partner here, Baxter, who is with me today, at least on the screen. We created this semester a Meet the Therapist series to really put counselors out, have students get to know them a little bit better outside of just their clinical roles. This is in order to humanize, destigmatize, and perhaps socialize students to think about what it might be like to talk with one of us. And for you as well, I would love if you would all follow SDSU Counseling on Instagram, because you can meet counselors too in that way. A lot of times, if you know a counselor, you might know just one, or you might know two. And I'd love for you to know more about who we are. We have tremendous skills, expertise, diversity on our staff or our faculty. And so I'm excited for students and everyone to get to know them better. We also do tons of outreach to students, so hundreds per year. We try to get in as many spaces as we can be in, because outreach is an intervention, and we want to reach all the students that we possibly can, and not just the ones who enter our door or actually come to the office. We have a website that we've enhanced now. I'm going to show you some screenshots of our website where students can really go and engage in coping activities and self-care things on demand. So any time of day, anytime that's good for them. And what we're finding is that's what students want, right? They are much more likely to engage when they have the time, rather than commit to an hour presentation or something like that. And we also have a new podcast in the last few months. We have a peer education program in addition to ARA, and it's for credit. And so students get to work with our office and become ambassadors for our services and really help to get the word out for us, which is a big issue. And then Active Minds is a student organization we advise, and it's a thriving organization. It's focused on changing the conversation around mental health, and also stigma reduction and increasing help-seeking behaviors. And so many students now are really wanting to help their community in this way, and we have a lot of participation in that student org. So moving to sort of the meat, I guess, of the continuum: assessment, treatment, and referral. We do things like assessments for accessibility accommodations in collaboration with the Student Ability Success Center. And those would be psychiatric disabilities that we would be working with. So we don't do the whole range of testing for other sorts of disabilities, but we work in tandem with them to provide documentation if needed. If you know much about our services, you know that we have a lot of innovation in our center. And so in addition to counseling and things that you might think of, we also have certified practitioners in several trauma treatments, PTSD treatments, cognitive processing therapy is one, prolonged exposure, and then EMDR, eye movement desensitization retraining, is something that requires certification, and we now have 2 practitioners for that. And then some psychophysiological treatments that we are offering, biofeedback and neurofeedback. And this is quite rare for campus counseling centers to offer neurofeedback. Some do biofeedback, but it takes certain equipment and levels of training that we valued being able to do for our students, because for some students, some potentially who may have stigma around traditional mental health help seeking, students who may not be as verbal as other students or as expressive about their emotions can really benefit from some different modes of treatment. And some of those might include working on heart rate variability and optimizing their psychology and their physiology at the same time to get a decrease in symptoms and really start to feel better and function better. We have a lot of groups. I have a different slide on groups, and I will tell you some about those. And sometimes the groups are the gold standard for what a student might be facing, and students can really get a lot out of this. I guess I'll give one example. We have a group who works, it's called Living with Loss, and it works with students who have lost a loved one and with their grief. And so hearing other students in a similar situation is incredibly, incredibly powerful and something that couldn't be provided one-on-one. It's also difficult to find out in the community because a lot of the grief groups in the community are connected with hospice and may have different sorts of losses in the groups, but our students can come together and support each other, and it's facilitated by a therapist, but really get a lot out of that group. So that's just one example of what might be actually the gold standard for a certain presenting problem. We also have a lot of targeted intervention and culturally responsive interventions. So we are doing just a ton of work. One example is the Epiphany workshop series, and it's focused on students who identify as Asian American Pacific Islander, and just has come into this wonderful series that's year-long with speakers and opportunities to process and understand and work with the information and the content. And it's mostly student presenters. They really get involved, and we have 3 Epiphany interns at this point. It's really been a great example of what a certain part of our community was needing. Another example is working with the Latinx Resource Center to provide this group called En Confianza, and really help students to feel connected. That group is fairly new and is going now. And we've actually had some students from the Imperial Valley campus participate. And so they can get that feeling too of being connected to our campus and to other students with similar identities. We also do a lot of work in collaboration with the Women's Resource Center, some specific programming there, Black Resource Center, Pride Center. We work at the Center for Intercultural Relations, and even groups like student athletes who need some specific support. And then guardian scholars within the EOP program, and student leader support. So if you think about the RAs and CAs and residential education student staff, especially this year, they're really experiencing something unique, and they have a lot of their own challenges. And so trying to, first of all, every year train them on the front end in listening skills and empower them to support students, but also support them in their jobs as they get going. And then we also have drop-in opportunities, which I'll talk about as well. So if we think about crisis intervention, this is something that is really important in our office because it can't wait, and it can be very life or death. And so we provide urgent appointments, urgent assessments, crisis intervention, crisis management, and then also a lot of consultation with faculty, staff, parents, and students concerned about other students. And I really encourage you all to call us and have a consultation with one of our therapists. If you're concerned about how to approach a student, perhaps they provide concerning content in an assignment or something like that, how to reach out, we're happy to help talk that through with you. It's not a situation where you need to report it to us, but we could try to help you figure out how to get them referred over to us, which is ultimately their choice. But I know that it's a big concern for faculty and staff when they have students that are concerning. And also tragedy debriefing for groups or individuals, and postvention after something has happened. And this can be a community event, or a tragedy with an individual, or someone who's living in the residence hall, or something like that. So we're doing some of that work, which, you know, we really try to be flexible and adapt to whatever might be needed in that realm. So I wanted to just to give you an example of how we start our services at Counseling and Psych Services. And what we do is we will have a student begin by having a phone consultation with a therapist. And this is to help hear their concerns, and then we would give immediate recommendations, help identify next best steps right then and there. So it might be services at CNPS and any of the things that I mentioned. It might be off-campus resources, other things, connecting to other important resources, or they might have their needs met after that conversation. But we do a very in-depth sort of assessment of what the students' needs are based on a myriad of factors, including what other resources they have, if they're able to benefit from what we call a short-term model. Almost every counseling center in the US uses a short-term model for treatment. And then students who need really much more ongoing or more frequent or more in-depth treatment would be provided a referral, and that would be a very thoughtful referral based on all of their personalized situations. So that's a bit about how we start off. If I could ask you to set up the student for the best possible scenario, my suggestion would be to say, give them a call and get their recommendations. So that you're not prescribing any certain thing and sort of setting them up for thinking that they're going to get one thing and then maybe the recommendation. And as I said, the gold standard might be for something else. And just really trying to promote openness to our recommendations. And if they ever come back to you and say, well, they didn't help me, or they turned me away, or they're too busy, or anything like that, then you'll know that you can say, well, what do they recommend? Because we would never say, we're too busy and we can't help you. So please dig a little deeper. And if they're not satisfied with the recommendations, please ask them to call us again. And we want to help address barriers and really see it through until a student can be connected with appropriate treatment, whatever that is. These are just counseling session, group sessions, which are now occurring virtually on Zoom, doing some phone as well, but mostly we try to do this video conferencing if students are able. So I said I would talk a little bit about the groups. So we have some groups like Women of Color Empowerment Group. RISE is for students who are survivors of sexual violence, and that is in collaboration with the Women's Resource Center. Healthy Emotional Living is for students who find themselves on a roller coaster of emotions and really would want to work with those emotions more efficiently. And Everyday Mindfulness and Meditation is a very popular workshop at our center. We provide it 2 different times during the week to try to meet student schedules. And we continued it all summer because of the COVID situation, and it was well attended all summer. It's something that students really benefit from, learning sort of from the ground up how to introduce mindfulness into their lives to improve their functioning. Talk It Out is an informal consultation opportunity for students. So it's a drop-in. When we're in person, we tend to do it at different locations around campus, and we take a neighborhood model, which is sort of, we want to have an opportunity for students to drop in sort of close to where they are. So, you know, maybe in the EBA building, or we did some in the engineering building, and on the other side of campus, we did and still do one with the International Student Center. And those are just some examples, and they're all available on our website. So here is a screenshot of the website, and we've really bolstered the content so that students, as I mentioned, can come here and get some strategies and skills, avail themselves of these resources at any time. And faculty and staff can as well. So might take a look. So there are some mental health apps that are available after a a very extensive review of the apps that are out there, which there are a lot. And then self-care strategies and skills. And you can see here, it says the podcast State U is an option for students. And the most recent episode was about new semester, what it's like at this time. And then there's some guided meditations and body scans and some other biofeedback tools that students can use. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the COVID situation. This was just a word cloud that was compiled in the spring after a lot of campuses sort of closed down and went to virtual learning. And so these are some of the reactions that students had. So from okay and safe to just heartbroken, depressed, disappointed, but then also necessary, relieved, annoyed. And I want you to pay attention to this. Is not every emotion was negative. And so students are really having a range, and sometimes they're going in and out of that range of emotions, as we all are. But we want to give students the opportunity to say if there is anything that they're feeling that might be a positive emotion in some way or some benefit that they've gotten, so that we're not prescribing how people feel about the situation. I think one of the hardest things right now is for us to know, all of us, and for students to know what would be helpful. What do we need right now? We know we need self-care, we know we need exercise, but how do we get that into our lives? And as we try to program and provide just relevant and appropriate treatment, as we always do, we are listening a lot in any situation that we're in. We are having focus groups with our peer educators and other peer groups. And then we also did an Instagram poll. And the top 3 choices that students wanted to hear from us about were stress management, which is pretty much number 1 pre-COVID, all the time, stress management and anxiety. And number 2 was staying motivated. And I think it's, obviously really hard in a virtual environment to kind of keep our eye on the prize. We don't get maybe energized by the in-person activities associated with courses and with socializing. And it's a little bit hard to stay motivated. And so also difficult conversations. I think that is newer in the COVID situation because of where students find themselves, either spending a lot more time with roommates that they did choose, or maybe they didn't choose, or back with families of origin, or in places that, they really didn't necessarily want to be or plan for. And so they're having to have difficult conversations about what it's like to live with each other all the time, 24 hours a day, and not leave as much. And also if people are sort of living differently related to COVID, either taking precautions or putting themselves at risk, they're needing to talk about those difficult things. And so one of the things that we've responded with is to have a drop-in group to talk about COVID or not. If people are sick of talking about COVID, they can certainly speak about other things, but we've had them loosely focused on these 3 topics. And then also, as I mentioned, the drop-in opportunities. And then we've just done a lot of presentations, coping with quarantine series. This one was about virtual testing, but really trying to meet the current need, as we always do. And then our social media, our website has a lot of COVID information. And then we've also been able to intervene with students who are in isolation or quarantine because of exposure to COVID or testing positive. And our ARA, Aztecs Reaching Aztecs peer facilitators, are calling each student in the situation to check in on them, to make a point of connection with someone when they are isolated, and just see how they're doing and see if they can connect the students to us or to other resources. And then also we have a clinical case manager in our office who is connecting with students as well in that situation. So anxiety, I think most of you know, working on a college campus, anxiety is the #1 presenting problem and has been for probably about 10 years now. We saw anxiety overtake depression. And so we're working with anxiety a lot in our students. Now with COVID, lack of choice, different learning platform, different environment, uncertainty, economic problems, etc. We're seeing anxiety still and possibly more. But I just wanted to add this bit of information about anxiety's effect on cognition, because our students are really needing to be fully in their cognitive selves as they are pursuing their academic careers. But something that can happen is dysregulated attention. And so extra distractibility, impairment in concentration, which of course leads to memory difficulties. And then there's also some impairment of some executive functioning. So like decision making, spatial navigation, really planning out, having foresight. This could also be budgeting time and planning for this semester of testing and things that need to be completed, and assignments and group projects. And so you could see how this could really take a toll on academics. So what can you do as supportive faculty and staff? So for the class or the group of students you may be working with, they need to know that you care, number one, about their learning and also their well-being. And so students who feel cared about actually perform better. And as I am sort of in study myself about how to manage a virtual team or manage in a virtual environment, I think probably everything I've read or engaged in has said that you need to sort of be more of who you are. So more caring, more demonstrative, more humor, more intentional about the messages that you're trying to convey. And I think this is a really important one in normal times and in now, that just portraying, conveying that we care about students and how they are. Being really clear about expectations. So this is something that's very important in a trauma-informed lens. And I think that during and after COVID, we really need to expect all students to be at risk for difficulties with their well-being. And we need to kind of come from that place all the time. And so being clear, having sort of everything written down, understood, etc., is important and will reduce some of the stress associated. If you can make testing not quite as stressful by just some examples, avoiding time constraint, or maybe even dropping a grade so there isn't so much focus on each test that can increase anxiety, maybe extra credit options, etc. Again, these are not recommendations, they're just some ideas of what to sort of illustrate the point of what I'm talking about. And then encouraging self-compassion and coping skills, really making that explicit, talking about that, and perhaps talking about your own fallibility and how you also need to figure out how to manage during this time. There's really no pretending that the therapist, the counselor, the professor, the anybody is unaffected right now. And so we can use that to our advantage and just say, you know, I'm not, I haven't fully figured out how to best cope right now, but here are a couple of things that have helped me so far. Or I'm really tired. Just anything to kind of humanize yourself and encourage students to really put some time into how they are coping. And self-compassion is one that is written about in the literature a lot, and it is related directly to things like procrastination and time management, because a lot of students are incredibly, and staff of course and faculty are incredibly hard on themselves and self-critical, and introducing self-compassion can really help with a lot of academic endeavors. So what can you do for the individual student perhaps that is expressing distress or that you're concerned about? Knowing the resources at the counseling center is a great idea. Having the phone number handy, suggesting specific support, And also asking, how do you cope? What usually helps you? What's helping you now? And really, by doing that and by having the student talk to you about that, it really gives them a chance to think about perhaps some of the ways that they have been really resilient, or they have coped with things in the past. They do know themselves the best. And so we should assume that they are able to cope, and we can help them sort of shore that up if we can. If you're really concerned about someone, you want to be able to ask the question. And the question in my world is, are you thinking about killing yourself? Have you been having suicidal thoughts? If someone is depressed, or talking about they don't know if they can do it anymore, they're giving up, etc. If they ever say goodbye to you and it's not the end of the semester, you're really going to want to ask the question. And then following up, after you've interacted with someone who's in a lot of distress, just checking in later, like, hey, I'm thinking about you. I want to know how you are. Were you able to get connected to resources? I did want to say a word about generational differences related to disclosure. Generational differences and also a decrease in stigma around mental health have led us to the point where our students who are 25 and younger are more likely to disclose being in therapy and to disclose mental health concerns with peers, with mentors, with parents, faculty, staff. And so we are hearing this a lot more. And although it's part of their generation to have reduced stigma, they are going to help us all. They're going to influence us all and help us. But one thing that I have noticed with faculty and staff is, if we're in a different generation ourselves and we would never have disclosed this type of thing, it sets us up for what could be a miss in the interaction. And so either we sort of think we kind of overblow the crisis because we would never have done that, and this must be really terrible, or we can minimize, like, well, you just need to deal with it. So kind of watching where you are and what your own reactions are to this type of disclosure, it can be really helpful, because if you can put those aside a bit and just inquire of the student, tell me more, how are you doing? That's helpful.
Jen, can I interrupt you for just a second? Because
Yes.
Sandra had a question in the chat, and I think it actually, you might have answered it partly, but she asked, how do we encourage a student to take advantage of psych services if they have not admitted their distress to us, but we suspect it due to our lack of participation or productivity?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think during this time, it is easier to broach this topic because, like I said, we all know that we're all impacted. And so asking somebody, just, if you can have a one-on-one conversation and just say, how are you? Some sort of open-ended, how are you doing? And then what the question acknowledged was some pretty observable behaviors that can be commented on. And so the more you can do that without diagnosing, the more compelling. So I'm concerned, I want to express my care, right? I'm concerned because it seems like you're participating less. And so you're just really commenting, not a judgment or a criticism. It's just a comment about why you might be concerned. Would it be okay if I gave you some information about counseling and psych services? Who is supporting you? Do you know about resources on campus? How can I be of help? And that is a way that you can kind of get to that. So you don't have to bring in any, like, you seem depressed or you seem anxious or anything like that. Just asking how they are, listening well is incredibly, incredibly powerful. And also expressing concern. Anything else, Jennifer, right now?
No, I was just gonna say thanks. I think that covered a lot of it.
Okay. So what can you do for yourself and your office or your department? So engaging in your own self-care that's effective. Again, I know right now it is hard to know what to do, but you want to be the model of that. You want to take care of yourself. and support your colleagues as well during this time. Consider having a department training around mental health that might be specific to your specific population or something that you've been seeing. And then just taking time to process or brainstorm or support each other. And professional development is great. And then developing plans for intervening with certain students. And so if there's a student of concern, you might want to be able to consult with a couple other people, perhaps the assistant dean, perhaps our office. And so kind of making a plan for how you'll do that, who you might let know, who you might get help from, et cetera, can be a good thing. So here is Baxter. He is our certified therapy dog, and in addition to the research about it interacting with dogs, lowering blood pressure and improving concentration and things like that, he really has served to destigmatize our office and in a way with our Baxter events on campus and things like that. This is an example of one of our Meet the Therapists. Sorry, it's a little cut off. And really just encourage you all to contact us if you need to, or refer students. And the best way is to start with this phone number, and we would set them up with a phone consultation or you. And so I would like to take